right, guys. Welcome. Looking today to have a discussion around job autopsy and what we need to implement as a procedure to our job costing. So one of the reasons for having this call today and why I wanted to introduce this topic is if you're in my program and you work with me, you know that I'm pretty adamant about job costing, and you should be too, as a core of your management accounting system, and understanding your numbers. Um, but there's a procedure that needs to follow job costs. So if you're just strictly job costing and we're not understanding why our numbers turned out the way they did, or what even worse, like we're accepting, losses without, coming up with strategies to improve. Really, we're not actually building good habits. We're not building a way of preventing problems from happening, and they will just continue to reoccur. So job autopsy essentially is designed around, having you lead your team and use, the job costs, the data to actually make better decisions and to make process improvements, to make changes within your organization that are going to have positive impact, right? So I get this question a lot is like, and I've even seen it with my own customers, is that they get so busy that even if job costing is getting done, by the time they get the chance to review it, all the important information is lost. The memory of what happened or what occurred is suddenly disappeared. Okay. And it's very hard to go back, especially when we've got a lot going on. It's very hard to go back and, effectively figure out, if you have a problem or not. And I'll tell you kind of the underlining symptom that I see the most of. It's repeated mistakes. Okay. So a good example of this would be, there was a material price increase on a core product, okay, or a core service. And in your job costing, you allowed that to slide and continue to get priced for weeks or months, okay? And at the end of the day, maybe it didn't have a huge impact on your overall, but it's completely avoidable. All right. So has anyone had that situation occur where you've possibly had a manufacturer increase, right? We don't make the update. Next thing job cost starts dropping, and we've discovered some mistakes. How about this infuriating one, where you discover that an employee has maybe not learned a new system that you've implemented, or maybe had, not been informed of a change that you had thought you'd made months before. I know this just recently happened in our business. In J Carter Roofing, we discovered one of our estimators was using a measuring tactic for our plans software, where they were just measuring one measurement on the drawing. And what it was producing was basically inaccurate takeoffs. So how do you think we discovered that painful lesson, right? So
Shortage of materials.
very much so. So we, just to kind of get it out there of what happened, but we um we were coming up short on three projects in a row. And one was substantial. One was like 1,800 square feet, equivalent to an entire roof. And again, the first thing that happens, and I'll explain to you kind of in our business how this works, is the job cost delivered to the operations manager. Operation managers review it. Okay. From there, on the job cost sheet, if you guys are using it, which you should be, you're going to see red or green. Okay. So the red or green is essentially what we're looking at is variance between specific items. Okay. And oftentimes what happens when we're analyzing job costs, for the most part, if you're doing it sort of the old QuickBooks way, that's absolutely useless. All right. That you're going to see your material, you're going to see your labor, maybe some other costs, but like what specifically in that material was off? What specifically in the labor was off? Was it a person? Was it a staff member? What exactly caused the price to not end up the way that we had quoted? Okay. So I'll explain to you kind of what good looks like. So good looks like for any contractor and anyone that's really dedicated to this and practices it will find themselves in about a 2 to 5% rate variance range. Okay. Meaning in your job cost, if you're really on point, okay, we should only have a 2 to 5% variance. Okay. If we start to get over that, which I'm seeing many of my clients, especially ones that are just starting, where they have wild swings in job cost. And I'm sure we've all been there where we've seen 20, 30, 40, 50%, difference in job cost. What is that indicating to you? What is that saying? And I'll say it like this. Whether it's good or bad, all right, a variance puts you in a vulnerable position. Okay. Because, for example, if you're in a competitive market and you have to stay tight to your pricing, but you have a 2 to 5% or 10% variance in your job costing, pretty hard to be competitive there, isn't it? Right? So, a good quote I like to use with my team is, championships are won by inches. If we don't make adjustments and it comes off your job costs and it comes off the data that you're collecting and that you should be analyzing. So the key area first is your job cost reports. All right. Now, what most people fail to do is they kind of go, oh, damn, we screwed up on that. And they'll talk to their estimator and kind of micromanage and go, you shoulda and you coulda. All right. What do you think you get back from that? Do you think they're scared straight? Do you think the problem's solved and it's just going to go away? Is that all it takes? Right? Can we say bad? Do better? Do you think that's an effective way to resolve a problem? No.
No.
Okay. So that's what today's conversation's about is how do we have those effective conversations? How do we have meaningful change occur in our business when we've had a problem, or if you're smart, proactively before you have a problem? And one of the best methods to doing this, all right, is number one, train your team exactly what's going to happen if we have a problem on a project. Get them used to reviewing, each and every project. So if you're using the job cost sheet, guys, you'll know we have a scorecard there. All right. It's not just specifically price. All right. And a big mistake you can make is just looking at the profitability, because what's going to be underlying to that is other symptoms. Okay. So I'll give you another example of what would trigger a job autopsy in our company. Okay. So this is again, a good scenario. We maybe hit our profit goal, okay, but we had an accident, we had two callbacks, and we had a disappointed customer who gave us a bad review, right? Where does that show up in your process? And again, it's about getting the people to the table that had an influence on those things occurring. All right. And another kind of good quote that I use for this is sometimes we need to slow down to speed up. So when your company's going, full tilt, all right, and these problems start to occur, what's your reaction? What's your solution currently for resolving it? Does anybody have one? No, or we just kind of hope and pray that it's going to go away? Okay. So, I'll share with you a bit of my experience before we get into the nuts and bolts of this thing. My experience is that there are key indicators on every project that can be easily measured. All right. These should be easy to measure. They're not long and complicated. All right. They're what we call leading indicators. Okay. So a leading indicator to me of whether a job went good or bad, all right, is oftentimes going to be between customer satisfaction, meaning did we get reviews, did we get referrals, okay, and our actual profitability, our variance report. Okay. So with that said, we can also have other things that will be a leading indicator for you. Accidents, safety violations, guys, turning over, having people quit on jobs. Like all of these things can be an indicator that we have a deeper problem. And if not looked at carefully, could go unchecked. Okay. Unchecked problems lead to bigger problems. I promise you. Okay. So let's go through a simple process for job autopsy. Oh, and by the way, Here's all the documents I'll be sharing today. So here's a whole kit for this conversation today. You guys can, I'll throw it in the chat here. Uh, there we go. Throw this in there. Okay. And we're going to start with our SOP for the job autopsy. Okay. So, first of all, we got to be super clear on when exactly and what exactly triggers a job autopsy. And these got to be set rules that you are willing to be disciplined and follow. Okay. So in my business, in my company, and you know how the job cost sheets are all set up is variance. Okay. First thing that triggers job autopsy is going to be the variance on our job report, our job cost report. And like I said, the other report card indicators. All right. So there's a couple of things on there, callbacks, stuff like that, that will also contribute to this job autopsy. Okay. So that's the first step, is to figure out when and where these things would occur. Okay. Second part of this is to decide who exactly is going to be involved. Okay. So if you had a cost overrun, all right, is it is it appropriate to include your driver in these conversations? Is it appropriate to include, the accountant? Who should we have? Who was directly responsible, or who had the direct influence on what what indicator has been set off? Okay, so you want to make sure that we have clarity for that. And usually it's going to fall between project manager, all right, and your sales team, if you have one. It may be, the crew leader. It could be estimators. It can be a few people, but we have to be clear on when and where those people get invited. So there's plenty of times where we have a job autopsy where only 3 people are involved because they've set off the indicators. So I'll give you a good example of this. We have a estimating mistake, a very obvious estimating mistake, like the one I shared with you, where it's been discovered that somebody has possibly measured the project wrong. Now, do I hold my project manager fully accountable to that? Anybody help me out with this?
I think there's two things to this, and this
Mm-hmm.
is something that I learned over the years was right at the very estimating thing. I have a checklist of things that I do. I don't trust the scale on the drawings.
Mm-hmm.
I will start with, let's just say, a 1/4 inch scale
Mm-hmm.
of a certain room. And okay, well, that's going to be 20 feet. And on this drawing, there's going to be
Yep.
8 of them, so it should be 160. So I'm checking this.
Mm-hmm.
And especially on things that are bigger scale, then I'm, because you will find mistakes on drawings for sure.
All the
And then
time.
the other thing that I do too in my estimating is take numbers that I know makes are in. I've recorded that on average, let's just say electrical feeder to a suite should be 100 foot on average,
Mm-hmm.
and a telephone should be 85. So when I plug in, I take my total numbers in my estimate and I work it back and just double check, am I within that range or something off? Or I can
Mm-hmm.
check conduit lengths. I have 100 fixtures and I have this much conduit. Was that
Mm-hmm.
taken off correctly? Oh, it's only 10 feet and it's supposed to be 25. And you can try to pick up that stuff at the estimating stage. And the other part that happens too is you do rely on your field staff to check things too.
There you go.
They're
So
not off the
that's
hook just because the
that's right.
estimator screwed up. If right away they see something there, they better speak up about it.
That's you nailed it. So in fact, in this situation, there was 2 people that were accountable beyond the estimator, because I don't an estimator again can make mistakes. We all can make mistakes, but there was a salesman who sold the job and there was a project manager who produced the job, all of which missed the mistake. So now, again, because that can be directly contributed to who had influence, Had the sales rep checked the estimator's numbers like they're supposed to, okay, they would have very clearly been able to tell. Had the project manager not, leaned on the estimator to create the work order, all right, that's what ended up happening in this situation is they were both busy and they got the estimator to be their admin instead of them looking at the drawings, making sure there were no mistakes and following our procedure. So the outcome was two people, three people altogether missed the mistake. Very easy to miss. And to go backwards with this conversation and use it as the example, there was nobody at that table that could make an excuse. It was a full stop thing because they had all been trained. I have certificates of completion. They all were, you know, very knowledgeable. And again, we're not talking, new people to the company. All right. So, but they're on that table. They're in that discussion. Okay. Now, what's super important here is how you lead this, like the autopsy, because if you want things to turn into a mutiny, show up and start pointing fingers and watch what happens. Okay. That's not bad. Don't do that. Okay. That's not what these meetings are for. They are not to point fingers and blame. All right. By the time you are getting to this meeting, and if you're doing them properly, all right, it needs to be understood that this meeting is to accept the responsibility for the mistake happening if it's happened. Okay. Discover what may have caused it or created it. All right. And keeping that environment of being productive with it. So I want people personally to own their mistakes. All right. In my business, just like anyone else. So I make it a safe place to own their mistake first, meaning that I never raise my voice. I stay neutral. I never use the words you should have and you could have. In fact, it's not my job to even give the solution to the problem, even though if I have it, okay, even if I've solved this before, I have to shut my mouth. Okay. I'm a mediator in this conversation because did I have any direct influence on the outcome of this? No. Okay. So just like you should have, if you had a direct influence, all right, it means that you need to include a mediator as well. All right, for these conversations to be productive. And I can't stress this enough because it can very quickly become an emotional, finger pointing, unproductive meeting where you'll never want to do it again because it was terrible. To make them not suck, all right. Yes, there has to be accountability, meaning that anyone that's coming to this call needs to understand that we are going to accept the accountability of what happened, and it's safe enough of a place where we don't have to feel like we're going to lose our jobs because we made a mistake. All right. My rule of thumb is I don't care what mistake has happened. As long as it's the first time and it's not something we're learning again or it's a repeated thing. Okay. And does it happen from time to time? Yes, absolutely. It happens. Okay. And I'm going to show you how we deal with that. But effectively, let's get the right people around the table. Let's slow down to speed up, meaning that most people won't stop. They're on to the next job and they're not taking the information. And it's so valuable. Stopping the team, having a procedure, having a place where we can have an open discussion without raising voices, without finger pointing, without people shutting down and being upset, right? So again, explain this to the team, be clear about it. Okay, because you won't get people to most people don't like to take accountability or admit they were wrong. Those are things that you have to develop as a team, and you want people to own the mistake. Okay. The only way that's going to happen, in my opinion, and in my experience, all right, is first of all, for you, if you're the authority, all right, if it's your business, you're the owner, all right, to remain neutral or to have a mediator. Fair enough? Okay. So we want to set a timeline to these things. It's very, very important that things are kept on an agenda, or else it becomes a conversation going in circles. Okay. We got to be very clear about what we're doing exactly. All right. So for us, again, we have very specific documents we're reviewing, job cost reports. We're looking at our budgets, final costs. We're looking at, supplier scorecards. We're looking at, and again, if you want to see the scorecard, it's in our job cost form. I can pull that up for you guys towards the end and I'll include it. But everything in there is black and white. Okay. It's meant to be black and white so that we're not debating the facts. Okay. Because that can happen. If you go into that job cost with inaccurate numbers, with incomplete documents, you're going to find that it's very difficult to have a productive conversation and to get anything meaningful from it. Okay. So, agenda, a checklist, which I'm going to include for you guys on what exactly has to be included. All right. Now, this will vary slightly for you and your business. All right. So, again, and then the right people at that call. Okay. So, if a sub crew or a crew member, we got to make sure that we're making, the people that had influence on this involved. Okay. Um, we have a bit of we would do a document review. So part of the first steps, okay, is to actually have everybody that's there review the documents we're sharing. Okay. And if you can, and it makes sense, all right, you would be sharing these prior to the meeting so people don't feel caught off guard. Okay. Very important again to reduce the amount of resistance that you're going to face, and to get anything, like I said, meaningful out of these conversations. So schedules, timelines, all of that, the more information that you can share prior to this meeting occurring, the more people have time to think about it, and the more that you've set the standard and you're using your core values to have these conversations, the more productive they become. Okay. Again, like I said, when you do a first one, it's super hard to remember all these things. That's why I'm kind of creating this document, but um very, very powerful if you get it right. In fact, I could not be sitting here if I didn't do these things. Okay, there is no chance. All right. And most of you guys are fighting a chronic problem, a chronic symptom of not having these tough conversations. And they can be tough. All right. They can be very difficult. All right. So again, keeping your meeting structured, having a agenda, sharing documents is openly and transparently prior to the meeting. That's very important as well. Okay. Now, there is a bit of depending on your business, maybe you're not sharing a job cost form with the laborer. That might not be, so use your better judgment on that. We practice open book accounting, so for us, anybody that's going to be at that meeting, site supervisor all the way up, is open view of the job cost, so we're not concerned about it. But maybe in your business you have a different structure. All right, you're still going to share, everything pertinent to the project. Now, another kind of hack here, or a tip, um, the administrator should be the one preparing the documents, and there should be a set procedure for those documents, how they look, and a standardized way of doing it. Okay. I made this mistake a few times myself where um, I'm bringing things onto the table that people maybe haven't seen before. All right. I can remember one specific example where I was sharing a whip report. Oh, let me just give me one sec. What the hell? All right. So a good example of this is I was sharing a whip report. So that's a work in progress report that nobody understood or was aware of. And it became sort of the point that I was trying to make in the call. All right. This backfired terribly on me. And the reason why is nobody knew what that document was for and what it was actually communicating. And I was trying to explain the damage that running over the schedule, even though we made we hit our profit margins and everything, our project took 3.5 weeks longer. I wanted to show the impact that had on cash flow. All right. But I hadn't ever used the document. So what do you think we spent most of our time in that meeting discussing? Anybody guess? Nobody? No. Okay. We spent our entire time me explaining the document. Okay. By the end, we had completely lost focus, and there was so much confusion in the room that nothing productive came from it. So that was a very valuable lesson for me to learn, is that, if you're bringing back documents to the table, they better be the standard ones that you use. I've gotten, again, just from that, that and other lessons I've learned. Um, I make like everything you see, the job cost sheets and everything, even though we use job tread and everything else now, we still use the same job cost sheet when we're doing a job autopsy. All right. We still use the same check the checklist. We still use the same Excel sheets. Like nothing has changed because I standardized it, and the pain of trying to bring new things to the table it takes away from the conversation we want to have. Okay. So once we get into this autopsy, all right, we're gonna have, a cost review, obviously, first and foremost. Okay. We're gonna allow everybody to have an opportunity to, buy in on it. One of the things you want to make sure of is that everybody, including the person that doesn't say much or that is quieter, okay, gets an opportunity to speak. Okay. So again, you as the mediator, all right, have to give everybody an opportunity. So this has to be more question based to get people to open up and to get people to discuss what their observations were. Okay. If it's not that conversation, what ends up happening is it gets hijacked. Lots of times the sales team has a tendency to kind of take over the conversation in our business specifically, and that can happen in yours as well, right? That can happen. Maybe it's your project manager. You can't allow that to happen. You got to give everybody a chance to speak, make their points, okay, and go through the procedure step by step. Okay. So now, what do we do? We've had this discussion. We've had a review. Everybody's aware that maybe the project lost money. Maybe we had a bad review. All of that stuff's been sort of communicated out in the open. And at a certain point, we're going to have a party or parties take accountability. What do we do from there? What do you think would be a natural next step to this?
I think it'd be fine to ask the different people at the different levels to how they would modify their SOP or their checklist
Mm.
to make sure that error didn't happen again. How can we prevent this in future?
Right. So here's what I do personally, and what I've found to be pretty effective is we're gonna whoever was involved, okay, they're gonna tell me what lesson they learned. First and foremost, I want to hear it out of their mouth. If they're
And
not able to come up with that on the spot, all right, we have a day to submit that, okay, but they're gonna give me the lesson learned. What did they learn from this? Okay. And again, all types of wacky answers. You'd be like, some of them are wild, but I don't, that's not my place to judge. All right. And again, this is me being a good leader and not my manager hat on. Okay. I'm gonna get them to give me the lessons learned for why the problem happened and how we're gonna prevent it, all that stuff. And then they're gonna give me the action items, all right, for what they're gonna do to prevent it from happening in the future. Okay. I get that in writing from them. Okay. And maybe that includes an SOP. Maybe that includes, and this is a place where you can have, if you want to be constructive, you can plant suggestions. All right. So, Greg, you brought up an SOP. That's where I'm going to contribute slightly to the conversation is, they've learned, they know what the problem was and what they've learned from it. Now, you may have to help them out in terms of solving it or preventing it from happening again. Okay. This might be a team effort. This might be a brainstorming. And this is really what pulls the conversation back together. So if somebody's really screwed up, so my example would be my estimator. All right. We didn't get into finger pointing. We didn't get into, you know, excuses. Everybody that was there, they know that I don't accept those anyways, right? The facts are the facts. There was three people that had to provide me with a lesson learned and take accountability and provide me with action steps on how they were going to prevent it from happening again. Now, I got three very different answers, three very different solutions, but all to my favor because, all right, it's my first rule is, hey, shit happens, mistakes happen. Okay. I can't, I'm not perfect and I don't expect everyone around me to be perfect either. Shit happens, mistakes happen. Okay. What I won't accept though, what I won't tolerate is having them happen over and over again. All right. And the lesson here, again, is that you want to empower your staff after that to take action and to understand that they had influence over that outcome. Okay. It's a good chance to make sure that your team is connected, and that they understand that they are contributors. Okay. So, and then the best part about it, all right, if you do this properly, is they're going to come up with the solution to the problem, not you. All right? Because most of the time, what happens, and I see over and over in almost everybody's business that we work with, is they're the master firefighter. Okay. They go in, they find a problem, and then they try to put out the fire, and it becomes more of a dictator thing, like you do this or I put this in place to stop it. And I'm going to say that it largely is ineffective. It's ineffective from preventing the problem from happening again. All right. The shoulda, woulda, coulda, all that stuff. And what's worse is if you solve that problem yourself. Okay. So let's say that estimating thing, I go, you know what? I've got the solution. We're going to lock down um the estimating plan program, and I'm going to have two people check the scale before it goes in. I'm going to put this checklist in place, and now you guys do this. What's that do to your team? Just imagine for a second. What does that do? Even though it's all like in good, like, what's it do?
I think it demoralizes them.
Okay. It's pretty close. It turns them into dependents, for
Mm-hmm.
one, and it makes them afraid to make mistakes. Okay. So when you step in and your influence is, you use your influence to try and get your way, all right, and you try and solve the problem, it prevents people and it makes people afraid to make a mistake. And then they're going to come to you every time there's a problem, every time there's a decision to be made, every time something happens, they're going to push it back onto you. All right. And does that help us to develop a team that can work without us?
No.
No, completely the opposite. So one of the hardest things for most owners to do, all right, is to give up some of that initial influence on solving the problem, all right, and to step aside and let somebody else even knowingly make a mistake. Okay. But you have to understand that, like, if you want to have a business that thrives without you, you have to be able to lead leaders. Okay. You can't do it if people are completely dependent on you. All right. It creates a rake. Everything comes back to you, all of it. All right. And then it's just a nonstop flurry. People don't solve their own problems. They don't think for themselves. Okay. They're afraid to think for themselves. They're afraid to take, any sort of risk or, again, to feel empowered in your business. And most of the time that just becomes a job. Right. And we've all heard of the term quiet quitting, right? People that just quit. You don't know. Okay. That's a very good way to do it. All right. So again, if I'm just bringing somebody into my office, berating them, and then giving them more shit to do without having them feel when they leave this meeting that they have power and that they are valued as a team member and their opinions are valued as a team member, I'm going to get that right back. Okay. And I'm going to get that back in the form of they're dependent on me to think for every little thing that they do. Okay. Can anybody here think of a time when this may have happened to them or could be happening now? Hmm. So that's sort of a trick question. Like I'm well aware most of you guys have this same thing going on, but let's maybe put it into a better perspective. All right. What do you think will help you to move away from that style of management? What would you need to feel secure or to know that your team is functioning well? Or your team is healthy. Let's say you have a management team and again, we'll talk about how this applies to just a single person as well, but like, let's take it from the team perspective. All right. A healthy team, I'm going to tell you right now, they have conflict. All right. A healthy amount of conflict. People aren't afraid to share their opinions. Okay. And that's going to lead to some conflict. That's fine. An unhealthy team on the other side, on the other end, has no conflict or very little. No one's giving input. No one's contributing. That's an unhealthy, it's a dysfunction of a team. Okay. So we want to invite a controlled amount of debate and a controlled amount of conflict because conflict leads to solutions, leads to things changing. And you want to have people at that table that actually give a shit, all right, enough to share their opinion and put in, have some influence. But it does something else that maybe we don't take into consideration, all right? And it's a thing called buy-in, all right? If we want to change, all right, um, and we demand it of our team, okay, that's usually taken, one of which ways. If it's easy enough, they'll do it. If they're influenced or if they're inconvenienced by it, it's not going to happen. Okay. And it'll fade away. Or maybe they'll start it and then they won't follow through. All right. The reason for that is because that's your idea. That's your objective. Okay. You're missing the buy-in. All right. The buy-in is, and the art to all of this is get them to think it's their idea or have it be their idea they're at. Okay. And then now it's something that they gave you the idea, not the other way around. All right. You didn't tell them, they told you. Okay. And do you think that the success rates goes up with that when somebody else gives you their idea? It's just like sales, right? We don't want to sell people. We want them to sell themselves, right? Same thing goes with your team. We want them to solve their own problems. We want them to think for themselves. We want them to, be leaders and be independent and grow within our business. We cannot do that unless we give them the room to do it. All right. And again, like I said, at the end of the day, it may be it may be reactive to you to try and solve problems for your team, but you're doing them very little good, if any, if that's what your approach is right now, right? So this is a method that you can use that is very effective and getting buy-in. Okay. If you want to see positive, meaningful change, okay, have them buy in because now it's both your idea or it's, their idea and they're they're sold by it, right? You don't have to sell them it. You don't have to convince them of it, right? It's already the truth to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you gotta empower them and make them feel
Right.
that they're part of this.
Right. Well, and here's another part of it, right? Like again, if you want to be a good leader, all right, a good leader's able to see this, okay? A good leader isn't their job's not to be right all the time, right? It's to get it right. And I've been in plenty of these kind of meetings where I 100% know, okay, that the they're going to have a problem and it's maybe not going to work out. I've let people honestly fail, okay? Knowing, we've already tried that and it didn't work. But listen, I'm going to take a controlled approach to this and I'm going to keep my mouth shut because failure is a part of learning. It's a part of growth. If you don't have failure, if you don't have that challenge part to it, people aren't going to buy into anything. Okay. And I know it sounds opposite to maybe what our beliefs are, but again, there has to be somewhat of a struggle with this stuff. People have to be, capable of solving their own problems. They have to be able to absorb some of that stress. Okay. And you, as the owner, have to be willing to give them a certain amount of space to do that. Right. If you don't, and we want to micromanage and we want to, enforce our beliefs in our systems, right? And our micromanagement, okay, you're going to get the opposite of what you want, right? And that's a team that works without you. You're not going to get that. You're going to get a very dependent team. All right. You're going to lose a lot of leadership in your business. Okay. And it's not going to be a situation where that you can easily get yourself out of. Okay. I've certainly done this in building, a team around me that wasn't, didn't have the skills for it, especially in my earlier days. Um, didn't have the personality types for it, didn't have that. And I ended up just doing all the work. Okay. I'm sure you guys have all been there as well. All right. This is a good opportunity by practicing these kind of things to see who your leaders are. Okay. Because it's not always obvious. It's not always clear. Okay. A couple of these meetings, though, all right, after something's happened or a job has gone sideways on you, we'll certainly tell you who's who. Does that make sense to anyone? Okay. A couple other things that we want to make sure that we're doing on these calls. A big important one, and it's fairly easy done nowadays, is meeting minutes. Okay. That somebody is actually keeping your meeting minutes for these calls. We've now recently we've gone to doing the calls over Zoom. We just prefer that because we have people all over the place. We're not necessarily dragging them into the office, but we have a note taker there, just like our calls with you guys. That's a good method of running these calls. Okay. And then that any of the action items that get discussed, that we're actually following through and making sure those things get done. So again, after that meeting or that call, whoever is, taken accountability or responsibility or has an action item, you have to be the enforcer to make sure that those action items get completed. Okay. Or else, again, we can have great ideas, and this happens all the time. Great brainstorm. Yeah, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. Everyone kisses on the cheek and leave, and nothing happens. Okay. That's not very effective. So now we have to make sure that we're holding them accountable to taking the action that they agreed to. Okay. It's a lot easier if they've said what they're going to do. It's very easy to hold them accountable to that. It's difficult, on the other hand, to hold them accountable to you telling them what to do. Okay? Because that was you telling them what to do. And people will shake their head yes, nod their head yes, and you'll just never see it get done.
Is
Okay?
there a system out there where people could potentially record a problem and then write down what their solution would be, and you would just say like, yes, do it, or no, don't do it?
I'm sure there is. But again, you would fall back into you're the rake, right? So the
Or
whole
just something where you can record the issues and the solutions, like
yeah,
what did we do back then, and
yeah,
also a reminder, has this problem been resolved? My problem
yeah.
is always I get a million issues brought up to me, and
hmm
80% of them I can't take care of right now, and I forget them, and then they happen again.
Yeah, so 100%. Like every job, like would have like if something went off, and again, this is why I use it off the job cost sheet. Like all of those lessons learned, everything else become policies, right? They could become procedures from there. But we have our meeting minutes, which are the action items that were taken. All right. And it's simply a matter of us following up on those. And then any problems, and to answer your question, and hopefully this helps, but what's the outcome of doing this often and on every job is that people become proactive. Okay, so maybe I've told you before, but like we use a lot of SOPs here at my company. Okay, and a lot of the SOPs get started when someone sees a potential problem now versus waiting for the problem to happen. Because nobody wants to be caught up on these meetings. Like, they're okay, but like if you're getting invited to one and there's obvious reasons for it, right? So one of the things that we work on a lot is being proactive with our between our foremen, our supervisors. Like, don't wait for a problem. If you know there's a problem, bring it up. Bring it up on the team calls. Let's make it open. And then there's a absolute, so it doesn't ever come back to me. There's a procedure we follow for solving those problems, right? And that's more effective than you trying to police it all. Okay. I long ago stopped policing. I don't police anymore. I don't care to. It's not productive. It's not a good use of my time, and it doesn't work. Right. So if everything has to move through you, even solutions, okay, it's basically defeating the purpose. You don't want that. The whole point of this is you want to show up to this call or meeting, have people be accountable, have people solve the problem themselves, and then have people finish the action that goes with it. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I just want a place where I can like where we can learn as a team, how
hmm
did we solve that, and then how can we potentially avoid running into a similar problem again. And I don't
hmm
know, are you making
Yeah. So
these
this is the
SOPs on go high level, or
no, no.
what?
So we have the meeting memo, right? So like for us, again, like there's this is all I care about in these meetings, right? Give me the three things that went well, the three things or the three areas that could be improved in the field, right? That's like our meeting agenda going out. Okay. And then from there, we have our lessons learned. Okay. So everything gets documented in there. And again, I don't attend these meetings. Like if I'm around, I'll do it. Like it's rare nowadays, right? Like, but uh, the procedure itself is what's followed. Okay. So at the end of the day, I've really actually taught the operations manager and everyone else to solve these things on their own. I don't get involved because again, what power or control do I have over the outcome? It's actually it's not even productive for me to be there because then I'll give my ideas like it happens, right? And then, everyone rolls their eyes and ignores me. So, who is this guy? Who invited this guy? Like, but for a long time, this was, again, how we problem solved. Everything's documented, it's written, it's clear, all right, and we're deciding there and then, rather than it being all up to me on how to solve this. Like we're deciding as a team. That's the whole point of this, right? We're making the decisions. Other people have their influence on that decision. They're coming up with the solutions. They're implementing the solution, and it's taking all of that pressure off of me. Okay, so what method or what way would you rather in? Right? So it's a bit of a leadership shift. Okay, now in terms of the accountability side, the cool thing is like each one of those lessons learned and the action item is going to fall into adjusting a SOP if you've got them, creating a new one if you've got one. Like that becomes the policy. Now, if you get into a situation where that mistake gets repeated again, pretty easy. We just pull out that thing and go, oh, whoa, whoa, we already went over this. We already agreed to these terms. In fact, here's your signature. Here's you telling me what you were going to do. And it seems to me like you're not holding our core value and you're not following through with what you promised. Right? Now we're having a different conversation because I can very specifically, and again, it becomes a different, it's not a discussion we're having in one of these meetings. We're having a different meeting to discuss that, right? So if a mistake happened, like if the estimator makes that same mistake again and the salesman makes that same mistake again, I can promise you they're getting written up for it. Right? Like now we're going to the next level of discipline with it. Does that make sense? All right. And how are they going to argue with their own thing? Like, I didn't tell you, told me. Like, tell me what's going on here, right? Right? I didn't demand anything from you. You told me how you would solve it. You were clear and sure that it would be resolved, and yet here we are again. Right? So it puts all that on them where it should be, right? Okay. So let's talk quickly about a couple other things. Supplier evaluations. Does anybody do a supplier or subcontractor evaluation on your jobs? Okay. Um, is it cool if I share with you why I would include this as part of these discussions? Okay. So very common, all right, in terms of scheduling. What happens when a schedule runs overboard if you're doing remodeling? Who's easiest to blame? Who's the easiest person to blame?
Subs.
Yeah, subs. The guy that's not in the room is the easiest guy to blame, right? So what I found is suppliers are commonly targets, as well as subcontractors are targets. Okay. And that's why it's super important that we have a minimum infrastructure because this also comes into negotiating back with your supplier. So like if a supplier has in fact delayed a project, okay, um, we need to be able to keep that scorecard and that record, moving forward, right? So like again, I'm going to tell you, we are a great critic for our suppliers, and we, productively share that information with them because there's things going on that they're unaware of as well, but it affects us. So one of the easiest ways to communicate that, um, again, is a supplier evaluation. That's the evaluation from your internal team or the contractor evaluation. Okay. These are for subs. Where's my supplier one? Oh, I'm missing my supplier one, but I'll include that one. Sorry, I put this together at the last second. We have a supplier evaluation that basically is a basic scorecard. All right. Because what I found doing these previously is that people will point things out as in an assumption, right? So the supplier was late delivering the material to the job. You talk to the supplier and all of a sudden, well, I didn't get the PO till the night before. Now we're chasing that shit around, right? So again, make sure that in your process that you're eliminating any gray area. Okay. And also collecting the data that needs to be that will be required to have a productive conversation with the third party as well. Right. So again, you can screw this up the same way. You want to have, you want to have the discussion with the subcontractor. All right. And you show up to that call and you're using somebody else's assumption on that call saying, hey, you know what? You screwed up this job. You didn't show up for 3 days. He's going to have a list of excuses that basically wipe out that whole conversation. Right. And then now you're going back to your team going, well, you didn't tell me this or that. Eliminate that gray area. And the best way to do that is to have a standard form on every job that gets followed. Like the supplier evaluations are critical for us. We use them on every project. Our subcontractor evaluations are used on every project and they're cumulative, right? So that all that information adds up so that when I do have to have a discussion with a supplier or I bring all that to the table, right? And I'm using data to actually, provide them in order to get what I need from the project or from the situation, I should say. Okay. Anybody want to share a takeaway from this conversation today? Mario, you must have one. What's the takeaway?
Change my leadership.
Okay. Well, we've talked about this. You're here to do some of that, right? So again, it's hard, it's easier said than done, but this is a great way to start that process and for you to feel confident about it. Again, like I said, a lot of us struggle, especially early on with micromanagement, right? We want to be on everything. And the
I
more and
don't
more we
want
do,
to. I
yeah,
don't want to, but I
you don't
don't
want to.
have the tools to teach my
Well,
guys how to do it. That's the
right.
problem. I
So
don't have a, yes,
I'm giving you the first stage. If you like, again, it's very simple, right? We don't need complicated things. We need simple things. Okay. So job cost form, simple, right? I've given you a checklist of everything that you would need to have and you adjust it for your own. Okay. Standard procedure. What happens when we have a problem? Get that out of the way. Like that's the easiest one to kind of take advantage of now. And I don't care if you're a one-man show or I don't care if you have a 20-man team. It doesn't make a difference. This is a discipline thing, okay? And it forces you to understand the root cause of your problem and forces you or whoever else is responsible to come up with a meaningful solution to that. All right. So at least next time when we're crossing that bridge or we're encountering that situation, we have some sort of substance there on what we should do next. Okay. A lot of this stuff ends up playing into our subconscious too. Okay. So, the best way I can explain this to you is that people will retain this information if you follow these steps and you keep your leadership positive. Okay. On the other hand, you will have the opposite effect if you start if you start inserting yourself into the solutions, inserting yourself into, the job and everything else. That's why I say mediator if you're not directly, if you're directly responsible, if you were the estimator, you were the salesperson, all right? And keep these things productive because you'll get a ton out of it. All right. Same thing said, if you do it wrong, you're going to have hurt feelings and it's not going to be productive. Okay. So good practice to get into.
yeah,
Anybody
the
else have a
one,
takeaway? Yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
the one thing I would like to keep though is the information that
Mhm.
that they gained. I need to collect that information so
Absolutely.
when I'm losing an employee, that information is not gone with the
No,
employee.
for sure. So, and that's the beauty of this, right? Like everyone has those meeting minutes and the action items. And from that, again, if you're teaching your team the right steps, all right. So I try to teach and try to coach. I don't try to demand and I don't try and impose my ways, right? So like what you're seeing here is exactly, more or less we've implemented, right? Now, over the years, okay, it always results in the same thing. We're going to change a policy or a procedure, okay? I'm not going to do that. They're gonna bring it up, right? I don't even get into the yay or nay. That's a chain of command thing, all right? But something's going to change as a result of it, okay? And that change is well documented, okay? It's accepted by all parties, okay? There isn't anybody that's missing the accountability on it. Does that make sense? And again, it directly results in actions being taken versus us discussing it and doing nothing about it. Because that's not productive either, right? We can discuss it and have these hours, like you've just blown more of your own money doing them if you don't do right. No, the outcome needs to be a change, an action step, and this will never, like if we encounter it again, then we're going to be taking a deeper, more disciplined approach. Somebody's going to be disciplined for it, right? And basically you've got the most proactive thing. They gave you their word, right? They put it in writing to you. So yeah, try it. Just try it. Don't make it too complicated, or else it just won't get done. Fair enough? Okay. Anybody else have a takeaway from this? No? Okay.
The job costing is really helpful
Mm-hmm.
on so many levels to help you know in your job
Yeah.
how you're doing, and even if you can break it down into smaller pieces,
Mm-hmm.
that you can see how your job is really doing before it gets to be a big problem.
Totally.
Like don't wait till you're 3/4 through and find out your labor's nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Figure break it down to a reasonable thing that you can measure, and then on that. But I really like the point of being able to use how to handle yourself in the meeting. I
Mm-hmm.
I found that that's really sinks into me.
Yeah.
How I'm coming across to my guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I haven't been perfect in the past, but and made changes, and continually making changes to improve to
Right.
really try to be the best leader I can.
Right. Well, again, if you've achieved that point where you have a team of people around you, okay, if you've gotten to that stage in your business, all right, even a small team, okay, I want you all to consider this. Like you didn't bring people in and you shouldn't have people around you that you have to think for. Okay, you've got all these minds that can solve problems too. Okay? And what happens a lot of times is that we want to immediately put out the fire. We want to immediately solve the problem. We want to jump in and be the hero. Okay? But there's no glory in being the hero, and it only creates more requirement of you. Okay. At that stage where you have a team, it's more about getting things off your plate, getting things away from you as often and as effectively and efficiently as possible. And like I said to you, like if you want to grow, a larger successful business, you have no choice but to work through people. No choice. After $1 million, you're no longer capable of being the chief firefighter, right? Well, not easily, I should say. Okay. At that point, you have to empower other people to, take charge and to own things. So like this is a great way to demonstrate your leadership. This is a great way to remove things from your plate rather than adding things on. I mean, we all have an endless list of things that we've got to do, right? Okay, so but if you have a team and you're not building these things and you're not creating these conversations, I can assure you that, you will have a very disconnected, confused, and a high turnover team. Okay, it just like I've tried it lots of different ways. I've seen it. It's at the core of what makes a dysfunctional team, right? These are the conversations. Although tough, they're necessary, are they not? Okay. We can't avoid this. If something's happened, there has to be a change, right? We can't afford to continuously, be insane and just completely, have the mistake reoccurring. So, and you will be very surprised, guys. Like I said to you in this call, and I hope you take this one to heart. You will see things and people come out in some of these calls that you didn't ever imagine they were capable of. Always, amazes me, right? Because of the structure of it, that, all of a sudden the admin, girl that really didn't ever give us any input has got the solution to a problem, right? That makes more sense than anything I could have thought of. So give them that space and opportunity to do that. Okay. So real quickly before we jump off, anybody that doesn't have the job cost form, again, there's lots of fancy software and stuff out there that we can use to try and do these things. The quickest, easiest way, and the way I explain it to everybody, is like most softwares, and including Job Trader, if you make a mistake in there, they're hard to reverse. They're hard to kind of correct. Service Fusion, all of them, they're data entry, points that you have to be clear on. Still to this day, we use the job cost form, right? I have all these softwares, all these tools. The reason why is because things can be added, taken away, and you're not messing up your QuickBooks. You're not, like, again, we can have discussions, and the way that it's set up, again, like I said, is this this scorecard. All right. These are black and white conversations that we're having. So job cost form comes in as soon as that's evaluated. And like Greg said, we can actually see it as it's going, what was over material, labor, and your variance. Okay. So again, if you had a budget for, let's say, $2,000, all right, for a subcontractor, and that turned out to be $3,000. Okay, it's going to give you the variance. Okay, it's going to tell you whether you were on or off. Okay, so use these tools, try to utilize them to see where the differences in prices are. Okay, you're going to get a lot from that. And again, a lot of very simple mistakes can be resolved as long as the team's learning from them, right? As long as we're not repeating them, you're going to see enormous growth in your business. Fair enough? Everybody's gotten some value. Hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll chat soon.